The roots of these fig trees run as deep as the farming roots of Vani Scribante. His ancestors hauled their ox wagons onto this patch of land at the end of the Great Trek from the Cape nearly 170 years ago. One of the first farming tasks his family carried out was to stick fig poles into the ground to peg out a cattle kraal. Nearly 2 centuries later, these fig poles have grown into mighty trees.
It came from my late great-great-great-grandfather, I think, when they came here and settled after the Groot Trek, the Great Trek. They settled here and to make a kraal for their cattle to prevent them from lions and stuff. They chopped trees and planted the poles for a kraal. And they didn't know wild fig trees, and they started growing. So the trees that's behind me, the 4 trees of them, they were the wild fig trees that started growing.
Vani Scribante's ancestor was a master builder who came here from Italy in the 19th century in search of work. He ended up building many of the country's landmark stone churches. He married an Afrikaner, and in the Anglo-Boer War he fought against the British. More than 100 years later, Vani Scribante still farms the family land in De Wilt, just outside Pretoria. It is more than 100 hectares of cattle and instant lawn for the landscaping market. Now, for the first time in nearly 2 centuries, this family is thinking of saying goodbye to this land. The reason? A bolt from the blue, the offer from the government of the former Soviet Republic of Georgia to go and farm. Vani Scribante led a delegation of South African farmers to Georgia a few weeks ago.
We found a place that is devastated by communism and socialism. Absolutely miles and miles behind, years behind. I would say 80 years ago, when that happened to them, development virtually stopped. The wheat industry, and it's supposed to be their staple food. If I remember correctly, they produce only 10% of the wheat they need. But the seed is 80 years old. They never heard of hybrid seeds, selected better seeds and things like that. And by importing modern seeds, they immediately doubled the yields on little trial plots compared to what their traditional things is. The same with the maize. With more modern maize seeds, I'm not sure whether it's already genetically modified or just proper hybrids, but they more than doubled the yields from the seeds. And then they don't even plant their maize in rows. It's just like sowing it, and then that kind of practice, it's 60 years, 80 years ago, that stopped in South Africa, and they're still doing things like that. We also found a young generation that really want to break out of that situation and try and get the economy going and development in the country. So what we got there was the farmland is very small pieces of land. From the Russian, when they left, they gave the subsistence farmers, they gave them little pieces of land, and there's very little enterprise going on. But the government, with some help from enterprising places like some Danish and Dutch people are doing, and Italian people are investing a hell of a lot in the agriculture.
The offer to skilled South African farmers is the chance to buy freehold up to 80,000 hectares of fertile farmland in Georgia. A group from South Africa is going over in the next few months to advise how to parcel up blocks from 200 hectares up to 2,000 hectares. It's likely to be cheap land too, for as little as around $40 a hectare, a fraction of the cost of land in South Africa. Georgia, once a powerful farming nation, is keen to recapture its former glory after years of conflict and communal farming.
We are looking for investors in our agricultural sphere because Georgia historically always used to be agricultural country, but in Soviet time, in communistic period, we lost these traditions, and we would like to restore our strong agricultural sphere. And Boers are very well-known agriculturals. They are best farmers, one of the best farmers in the world, and that is mutual interest. They are looking for a markets, for place close to Europe, close to Asia, close to markets, and we are looking for investors in agriculture.
In the light of this, the Georgian government is also likely to sell land to the South Africans cheaply.
It seems to us that the Georgian government is very, very interested in us and very eager to get us going there. One of the first things they said to us, they will not rent us land. They will sell it to us. You must own the land, because in their experience, if people rent land, they just rape the land, don't develop. They want development. So they want to sell us land. They want to make it as easy as possible for the people there to get the land. They will actually be quite lenient. It will be state land. That is lying fallow at the moment. They are very interested in getting the guys there, and they are talking about more lenient paybacks and more lenient prices, maybe even.
One reason for the offer is a little-known historical link between Georgia and the Afrikaners of South Africa. A Georgian nobleman, Nico Bakhriatoni, fought on the side of the Boers against the British in the Anglo-Boer War.
You know, he is one of the interesting figures. He wasn't one of the heroes in the sense that he did something very brave during the war. He was a good marksman, so he could shoot well, although he'd never been in the army. But this is the kind of figure that one builds little myths all around, or you empower this man and say, look, this is the kind of man that can bring a good relationship between the Georgians and the South Africans. This happened in 1900. It can happen again in 2010, 2011.
Historian Professor Franz Johann Pretorius has studied the Anglo-Boer War for decades. He believes the link between Nico the Boer and South Africa has been thrown up in the 21st century by an independent Georgia rediscovering its past.
We've got contact with Georgia now, 100 years or more after this man was pro-Boer. There were other Russians as well. But this man really captures the imagination.
The climate in Georgia is good for farming, say the South Africans. They say they could grow everything here, from grapes to maize to apples and avocados. But the political climate may not be so clement, with Georgian opposition politicians against the idea.
Our government is pursuing a policy of betraying their own country, purposefully and consciously creating problems for Georgian peasants and farmers. The locals cannot cultivate their own land, and they have to leave their homes and the land that belongs to them. In addition, the authorities are strengthening sanctions on uncultivated land, which will result in mass depopulation of Georgian regions. The government has already started talks on relocating the Boers from South Africa. Specifically, they are planning to relocate 41,000 families of Boers to these regions, and you'll see how the ethnic balance in the country and the overall situation will change.
The South African government appears relaxed. A statement to CNBC Africa from the Ministry of Agriculture says, "We should not be alarmist about this. South African farmers have always expanded to different countries all over the world, including Zimbabwe and the DRC. But there are concerns about Africa losing its skilled farmers."
The fact of the matter is that we are losing people, and it's very tragic, because we as a country should realize that we have something that the rest of Africa would give anything to have, and that is a well-functioning commercial agricultural sector, able to feed ourselves. But unfortunately, things have been done, the ideas were good, but the implementation has been very poor. And the result is that a farmer who's under a land claim, and it hangs around his neck for 3, 4, 5 years, he's not going to invest in that farm when he knows it's going to be taken away from him, so he starts looking elsewhere. And it could impair our ability to feed ourselves, unquestionably. And that's the last thing you want when you're going into an era of food security. You don't want to impair our ability to feed ourselves. So yes, it is potentially very serious.
For the farmers themselves, there are other concerns waiting for them in Georgia: a language barrier and possible resentment from Georgians in the long run. Food for thought on a summer's afternoon in Pretoria for the farmers of the Transvaal Agricultural Union. Many of these farmers are worried about their future, whether it be costs, crime or land reform. The proof of the pudding was going to be in the meeting. You can be sure that this time last year, most of the farmers here would never have dreamed they'd have been sitting down around the table in Pretoria discussing seriously the prospect of going to the other side of the world to farm, to the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. As farmers left the meeting, the question was, would any of them quit the land of their forefathers to go to Georgia?
I would go there easily. I see there's a lot of stability for me, what I know at this stage, stability political wise in Georgia, because of the big international investment in there. I don't think there's going to be another political problems in the near future.
If it need to be, and I have to go one way or another, Georgia for sure will be a very, very good choice to go. You know, it's 9 hours fly away. It's just one night and you are there.
If I can go now, yes, I think so, and I'll try my best to get my things in order. And at this age, still going. The language are for me a big problem. I think we will start with a few 10 or 20 to just settle down, and then I think there could be more than 1,000 farmers make a good life in Georgia.
If you look into the roads, how many of them they are building. The buildings, my father used to tell me every time when you get into a city, look how many cranes do you see. And on one stage I count them in Tbilisi, I count 19 buildings at that stage, busy building. So I think, yes, for sure, there's a future positive approach within Georgia.
I don't want to come and make a new South Africa in Georgia. If I'm going, I will be a Georgian.
Around 60 farmers have applied to go to the other side of the world to plough their own furrow. In tough times for farmers, it seems that many have Georgia on their minds.